Hi there. I'm actually with Order 66 executed. Activate every single order. Oh god. I can imagine the clones getting like a major, like 110, like extremely painful migraine after all that. Like Order 66, that order was like difficult to deal with, but imagine all the orders activate at once. I can imagine that's gotta be like one power of my migraine. Headache, migraine, that's, oh god. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I'll put PPSW share in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. Now let's get started.
Hello. Our story begins in hyperspace. A Republic capital ship was en route from Mandalore to Coruscant. Inside of it were Ahsoka, Rex, and Maul. They were preparing for the end of the war. Soon Maul would be behind bars, and the Separatists would surrender to the Republic. Everyone was eager to get this war to come to a close. As Ahsoka and Rex were standing on the bridge, Rex turned back to take a communication. Down below the bridge, in the clone barracks, a bunch of clones gathered around a communication table when they got an important notification from Coruscant. The captain pressed a button on the console, and a message popped up. It was Pork Bun, the sponsor of today's video. Do you need a domain? Yoda does, for his brand new Mojo Dojo Casa house. He found it right here on Pork Bun. They've got hundreds of different domain extensions so that you can create websites, blogs, portfolios, and anything to show off your talents. Every domain with Pork Bun comes with tons of features like SSL certifications, who privacy, DNS, and URL forwarding. Who doesn't like a good deal? Also, if you're worried about trying it out, they've got free trials available for their link in the bio tool, which helps you with keeping everything together on Pork Bun. Not to mention their brand new AI tool to help you stay on top of your game to keep an eye on how to manage your own domain. Pork Bun is super simple to use and easy to navigate. Plus, you've got 365 days worth of support, so what are you waiting for? Get your domain today with $1 off your start at your Pork Bun journey. Links in the bio and pinned comment down below. Ahsoka watched him walk away, and then she felt a powerful shock to the Force. She could hear a commotion happening a galaxy away. Her thoughts drifted over to her master, who was the one of three voices she could hear. As a call from the Force ended, she turned back and ran to the communication table where Rex was. When the doors opened, she could see someone on the hologram in front of Rex before it shut off, and his helmet fell to the ground. Ahsoka said something terrible had happened. Rex turned around and told her to run. She didn't know why. He turned back and started blocking all the communication frequencies. The other clones on the bridge stood like statues as Order 66 made its way through the comm chatter on the ship. Different orders were being issued out to each individual clone, essentially a bait and switch. The activation of the inhibitor chips seemed to be activating other orders within the chips themselves. The other two troopers on the bridge had gotten orders 133 and 134, but that wouldn't do them any good. Both of these referred to senators, whereas their commander, Rex, who had received Order 6, was currently running around the ship throwing each and every single communicator out, destroying communication devices, blocking communications, anything he could do to stop transmissions from coming in. He looked like he was out of his mind. However, Ahsoka wasn't out of the clear. A couple of other troopers were moving towards her and raising their weapons. Maul down below deck was being executed as this was happening. The two clones that had received Senate orders raised their weapons to defend Ahsoka. Everyone was on edge, and she simply told them to calm down, because the clones dealing with the Senate orders weren't here to kill. They set their weapons for stun and dropped their brothers. Everyone was confused. Rex then came back and was out of breath. He told her that they should be safe now. Then the doors opened behind him. Jesse walked in with the biggest smile in the world. He couldn't be more excited. He got Order 9, which meant it was Yip Tip Tuesday. He was ready to feast. Ahsoka and Rex looked to each other, and then back to Jesse's contagious smile. On Coruscant, the clones were trying to piece everything together. Commander Apod received Order 66, but he didn't realize no one else did. So when he ordered the men to the gunships, they were kind of just confused. They did comply, but they weren't sure why. A couple of them didn't. 3 of the men had received Order 121, and they were dealing with another issue. Their order was to incapacitate and capture all non-clone leadership within the Grand Army, which meant that Admiral Yularen would become a sitting duck. Luckily, nothing about this order was deadly unless he resisted with hostile force. At the landing zone in front of the Jedi Temple, Commander Appo gathered his men up into formation. They awaited General Skywalker's arrival, but according to the Chancellor, he wasn't a Jedi. Didn't make much sense. What did that make him? They didn't really know. Due to the way the chips were acting, some of the men believed they had more important tasks to fill, but they weren't speaking up yet. They'd only begin to start having issues when Skywalker arrived at the landing zone. He got out of the ship and walked up to Appo, asking if everything was in order, and he nodded his head. Skywalker turned to the men and told them to march forward, except they didn't. One of the men with Order 29 was confused. If they were supposed to remove all local government officials, why were they at the temple? This order on Coruscant meant taking out mayors of districts and governors of cities. It was a very simple order, but the Jedi didn't have any political presence on Coruscant. Anakin turned back confused and told the trooper to follow orders. He was following orders though, which is why this didn't make any sense. He didn't understand the purpose of being here. What did the Jedi have to do with this? Another clone piped up and asked if they were even allowed to follow Anakin's orders. If he wasn't a Jedi, then he had no jurisdiction of command over them. Appa would have responded with hostility, but that was actually a fair point. If Anakin was a Jedi, they'd have to kill him, and now none of this made any sense. Anakin yelled, telling them that they were going to follow the orders given out by Palpatine. They were going to go into the temple and wipe out all the Jedi. One of the clones asked if Anakin technically counted as a protester. If he wasn't a Jedi, he was a civilian, and he was disrupting a military movement. The clones started to murmur, and Appo called for them to get back into formation and move into the temple. Now, some of them were confused, especially those with Order 53, which focused on replacing galactic leadership with Jedi leadership. Essentially, take the Senate out, move the Jedi in. The clones were simply going to enforce that, so why not use that one? Anakin started to get really upset. He was already on edge, and he was here to do one job so that he could save his wife. Anakin turned to Appo and pointed at him, telling him to get his troopers under his control and get them ready. He claimed to be ready for command, but he was showing no signs of having any sort of control over his own men. As Anakin was pointing at Appo, one of the men raised their weapons and fired several stun rounds into Anakin's side, dropping him to the ground with a thud. The troopers all turned over, asking why he did that. Instead of not saying what his orders were, he recited it like he was reading from a drill manual, calling it Order 55, stunning all protesters regardless of their compliance with Republic protocol. Stunned protesters would be tried fairly in court after the comeuppance was dealt with by the Republic troopers. Because he said Order 55, everyone knew what he was talking about. That was the issue, and the reason for the confusion between Orders 53, 66, and 29. They were all following the correct orders, technically, but no one else knew what they were following because the individual clones didn't say what the orders were. So before anything could turn into a contest or a firefight, they dealt with Skywalker. Now there was still the pressing issue of what about Orders 66 and 53? Were they supposed to execute the Jedi for treason against the Republic, or were they supposed to go and usurp the Galactic Republic and put the Jedi in command? What about Order 29? Appo initially thought about walking up to the gate and asking, but why would a Jedi say yes to Order 66? Since no one was stopping each other, there wasn't a need for hostilities. Appo asked what order the other troop had, and he said it was 53. So now, all these clones had 3 orders, many of them not aligning except for 53 and 55. What were they supposed to do? They just stood around awkwardly trying to figure it out. They could march on the temple, but if the order was actually 53, then they would be killing the supposedly leaders of the galaxy. This was terribly inconvenient. Inside the Resolute, Anakin would be locked up in a cell next to a very angry and upset Admiral Yularen. Across the city, the Coruscant Guard was having an absolute field day. Half the Guard was convinced Palpatine needed to be taken to a bunker under Directive 41. However, the entire other half of the Guard had a bit of an issue. Some of the clones were working under Order 4, which meant that Palpatine was unable to be Chancellor. So on one side of the executive building, clones were rushing Palpatine to a secret bunker to protect him, while on the other side, more clones were appointing Mas Amedda to the role of Supreme Chancellor. However, there was a terrible side effect to this. Because the clones announced to some other men in the unit that the new Chancellor was protected, the other clones, working with Order 65, had a serious issue with Mas Amedda, because he was their new target. Naturally, in the span of about 3 minutes, Mas Amedda went from Palpatine's cool sidekick to Supreme Chancellor to public enemy number 1. The clones who appointed him as Chancellor left him alone because they wanted to secure his leadership. What came next was the firing squad. But the chaos of the Coruscant Guard wasn't finished yet, because Commander Fox had received Order 42, which meant that the clone leadership in this scenario, being him, would act in place of the Chancellor and the Senate, which meant right after Masameda was ruthlessly executed, Commander Fox became Commander Chancellor Fox. Say that 5 times fast. However, despite the other members in his unit following that directive, there were others with Order 43, which meant right after Masameda was ruthlessly executed, Commander Fox became Commander Chancellor Fox. Say that 5 times fast.
No. No. God, no. Talk about a Star Wars tongue twister. God, no. I am not going to attempt that.
However, despite the other members in his unit following that directive, there were others with Order 43, meaning that their entire role was to incapacitate all forms of leadership on the galactic level. So while the 501st was thinking about dealing with local governments on Coruscant, the Coruscant Guard was dispatching troopers to capture Senate and executive leaders. Additionally, there were clones inside the building who were given Orders 7 and 8. These both had to do with the same thing. One just involved death. Order 7 resulted in all commanding clones being stripped of their military roles and captured, with Order 8 being the execution of clone leadership. Ironically, the only one that could impact Fox was Order 8, because Order 7 technically only counted for clones who were a commander and below, which Fox technically wasn't a commander anymore. Speaking of technicalities, Fox was now a target for the clones with Order 65, because he was acting as a chancellor. Everything became tense, until another trooper suggested using Order 53, replacing all government officials with Jedi officials. He was the only one in the unit with the order, and he thought it would be a good idea. He didn't say the order number like the 501st trooper did, but he said that there was an order for it. He just didn't know that number. The clones inside the executive building ended up sticking with the standoff. On Ryloth, there were 2 orders being passed around the most, both of which would result in terrible pain for the clones. Initially, they received Order 37, which was the capture of an entire planet's population to find a specific target. However, they weren't given that target. It was just the orders Captain Howitzer got from Coruscant. His second in command, on the other hand, got Order 5, which is shut down and destroy all astromechs for complying with the Separatists. There was no evidence for it, but there was also one droid on the planet that wasn't going to just be turned off. His name was Choppenheimer, and these clones wouldn't mess with him or Harrison Dula. So as the clones tried to shut down Chopper, they met true terror in the face of a droid menace. Across the Outer Rim on Felucia, Commander Bly was confused. He had been given Order 69, but as it turns out, it didn't do anything because this isn't Reddit. There was a Kaminoan intern who was adding executive orders, and Order 69 was his personal touch. For Kaminoans, the thought of 69 was funny, so he put it in as a blank, a placebo if you will. It activated the chip, but it didn't do anything. Speaking of Kaminoan interns, Topoka City was in a time of chaos. The Kaminoans placed failsafes into their system, just to make sure they could stay protected. None of the following 4 orders were meant to be activated, let alone at the same time. But essentially, one by one, everything on Kamino would be dealt with. Yes, there were troopers on Kamino with orders to deal with senators and so forth, but they weren't here, so why use them? Everyone just fell in line, starting with the execution of Order 111. It was simple, capture of Kamino and leading members of the planet. This was put in because the Kaminoans planned on using it if the Republic thought they would try and turn the clones against it. Essentially, a little reverse psychology. The hope was that in that scenario, they could marinate the Republic like it was a game of Among Us. However, what followed Order 111 was Order 112, the execution of all Kaminoan scientists. This order was made by Nala Se to make sure her scientific data didn't fall into the wrong hands. She had plans with M-counts and other experiments like what she had done with Omega and the Bad Batch. To Nala Se, this plan wouldn't ever have to be used, unless she was captured by the Separatists. The entire purpose of this was to protect Kaminoan investments. They could make new scientists, but they could not afford to lose the information, especially the kind that could make them a lot of money. Once the clones captured everyone, the entire science division was assassinated inside of their own labs, which also went hand in hand with the following order, 113. This was to ensure the protection of Kaminoan science as well. If they couldn't have it, no one could. Order 113 would have every single lab in Topoka City destroyed. Omega would be safe from this, but the labs would be decimated, ripped to shreds, and torn down. Lastly, to make sure the clones could take over Kamino effectively, Order 114 would replace all Kaminoan leadership with the clones. This one tied into Order 111 more than anything else. Just another way for Lama Su to make sure it looked like the clones had taken complete control over their planet. It would bail them out of any potential circumstances in which the Republic lost trust for them, except in this particular circumstance where the inhibitor chips malfunctioned the way they had today. Because as it turns out, the inhibitor chip, when activated, just transitioned to another order. So when Order 66 was activated, every single order in the list could be activated. It was just at random. Now that Kamino was completely under the control of the clone forces on the planet, all the information the Kaminoans had been hiding was now available to the troopers, and despite the executive orders running through them, they were curious beings. The clones knew that the Kaminoans had been hiding information from them, and so, in an effort to get to the bottom of those secrets, they decided to dig through everything. While the labs of Tapoka City had been destroyed, the Kaminoans did extensive filing. No one aside from the clones knew this, and it would be the clones' control over the city and everything within it that allowed them to access these restricted files. The labs being destroyed would only be a temporary blocker for anyone who came to steal Kaminoan information. As for everything in their security drive, it was designed to be impenetrable to most droids. It was constantly updated and protected, especially because it held the last little bit of Jango Fett's genome. The security measures had been updated since the Battle of Kamino. Regardless, the clones could get their information. On top of that, the leader of this operation contacted Coruscant to inform the Chancellor. Obviously, he was a bit surprised when it was revealed that Commander Fox was said Chancellor. Commander Chancellor Fox was having the time of his life. But as acting chancellor, he was able to issue out orders. Once everything calmed down on Coruscant and he was able to escape the tension of the executive building, he issued out Order 43 to a freestanding fleet. This order meant that all clone leadership would incapacitate all governments on a galactic level. In other words, if the clones were the leaders of the Republic, then any challenging government would be targeted. So because Order 42 was active, making Fox the Chancellor, Order 43 meant that this freestanding fleet would book it straight to Raxus and take control over the Separatist government. On Utapau, one of the clone orders crossed enemy lines and completely affected the droid army. It was Order 99, and Cody didn't really get it. Turn all the droids against Separatist leadership, so what he did do is blast the order through speakers. The real last military force the Separatists had became absolutely mental. They were fighting for the CIS, and then they turned against their original orders and backtracked. It was like they all became free-thinking. Tragically, this meant that a good number of them were killed in the process, but when the clones realized they weren't fighting back, they slowed their assault. Because some of these droids were present when Grievous told the Council where they'd be going, they immediately made their way to Mustafar to turn on their leaders, while the rest of the fighting force surrendered. They were free-thinking vessels now, and they had no interest in fighting anymore. Their war was over, and their leaders were gone, or destroyed, so no one to fight for meant no one to fight. Those who were able to escape would deal with the Separatist leaders themselves. Now Megiddo was the place to be. The clones got Order 66, and because Bakra is very quick to relay those orders, he very quickly issued out Order 67. So instead of fighting, the clones got onto their breakdancing positions and did their thing. Whether it was the giddy or the well, it didn't matter, because when Ki-Adi-Mundi turned around, his jaw hit the snow. He couldn't believe it. As a result, he was shot in that big fat head of his. Once he was dead, the droids watched the dance off, and because Ki-Adi-Mundi was dead, they danced on his corpse. Then the real battle of Megiddo came down to who could dance better than the other. Winning side kept the planet. Pretty good deal. Across the galaxy, there were actual Jedi deaths. They just weren't as frequent. This explosion of Orders 1 through 150 didn't cause a civil war either. Most of the clones were just left in a perpetual state of confusion. Some of them were able to act on them, but for the most part, it was a back and forth of different orders. But there were two fixtures that saved the Jedi and even the clones. Though only one of these orders saved the clones from themselves. Order 149 and 150 were the two orders that canceled out everything. One of them just went through a more unorthodox means to achieve it. Order 150 canceled every single order that came before it, essentially turning off the inhibitor chip and making it completely useless. After 150, the chips could not be turned on or activated ever again. When it came to 149, it made the clones their own greatest enemy. While some of the orders inside the list did turn the clones against their brothers, 149 was an elimination, that elimination being of self, which is why across many battlefronts troopers were taking themselves out for no reason. It certainly was a luck of the draw, or unluck of the draw, I guess, when it came to these orders. Palpatine had 149 just in case the clones became too much to deal with. While he was responsible for some of the orders, most of the list weren't things he asked for. Regardless, the actions of 149 and 150 were slowing down the clone movements against the Jedi.
Come on. Skip.
And any other foes across the galaxy. Back on Coruscant, Anakin finally woke up after being stunned more than enough times. He was confused where he was,
Good morning,
and Admiral
Sky Guy.
Yularen told him that he was inside of a cell, along with any other crew that wasn't bred on Kamino. Anakin asked what was happening, and Yularen told him that the clones received an order from the Chancellor's office. It started or ended with 6, and then they all became loopy. Some of them wanted to kill Jedi, others wanted to take down a random mayor on the planet. There wasn't a rhyme or reason to what they were doing, but they were definitely controlled by whatever it was. Anakin wanted to break free, but there was a clone monitoring his cell, and his cell was also laced with electrical circuitry, so that if he tried to break free, he would be electrocuted. This wasn't standard inside of Venators. Anakin and Ahsoka implanted it because they believed they'd catch Ventress, Savage, Dooku, or Grievous. The fact that they hoped to catch Ventress and put her inside of the room tells you how old the room was. It really wasn't ever used because most of the prisoners weren't deadly like any of those individuals that were pretty much now dead. And now, a clone was watching over Anakin like a hawk. Again, because he and Ahsoka didn't want someone breaking free, their ray shield surrounding it made sure that no one with Force abilities could break out either, so there was no point in resisting. Yularen and Anakin were both very grumpy at this turn of events. Because the 501st stationed themselves outside the temple, Sindralik and his temple guard came out to investigate why they were here. It was kind of funny, because the clones had come to the conclusion that the 66th Order wasn't the one they were supposed to follow, neither was the 53rd one. Chances are they were supposed to follow the 29th Order, by going out and taking out the local establishment. This conclusion came about because Fox was the Chancellor of the Republic right now. Everything on Coruscant seemed to be slowing down, but it was just unknown at this point. When Sindralik heard that Fox was Chancellor, he left immediately. The clones then fanned out. As they were doing this, there was a realization that Order 73 had been activated. Due to Fox staying inside the executive building, no one knew that there were clones inside the Senate building blasting down senators. Luckily, Order 73 only had to do with senators inside the Senate building. And even luckier, it was nighttime, so most of the Senate had left the building long before those orders were given out. Because the Jedi didn't know about Sidious being Palpatine, Sindralik was trying to help out the former Chancellor. He ran over to the executive building to help. The clones that had Order 66 didn't forget, but they believed it was an accurate order, one made so that the clones would not focus on that objective. This was mostly because Fox was insistent that they focus on securing the executive building. Also, one of his men had been hit with Order 77, which meant he was ordered to funnel out Republic propaganda, and Fox supported this big time. Commander Chancellor Fox didn't care for the Jedi, but they weren't his main concern. He was mostly worried about the senators or the former Chancellor. He believed if the Jedi tried to stop him, then he would wipe them out. But instead of trying to stop him, they just asked what he was doing. He simply said he was following orders. He needed to maintain the role of leader until the Republic could gather together and make right of whatever went wrong. Sindralik was very confused. Outside of Coruscant, there were issues starting to brew anyways. The contingency orders of the Galactic Republic had orders specified for commandos, and because most commandos never went anywhere near a unit or an army, it took time for them to get to them. The commandos were given Order 83 through 85, among the other orders that were spread around the Republic. Some commandos were out to execute government officials with Order 83. Others were forced to kill any and all of their targets with Order 84, and lastly, those with 85 were supposed to take control of the closest armies to them. These all had a multitude of issues, because a good number of the commandos' targets were innocent. On top of that, 85 conflicted with 85 because Order 101 meant that the commanding officer were to seize control of the largest standing army near them. The purpose of this order was in case a commando droid or another unit had seized control of the army without the troopers noticing. Essentially, 101 meant that the individual unit wouldn't accept orders until the replacement commander got there. This had already been dealt with, but now with Order 85, commandos were making their way to them, and the conflict became one of commandos and commanders. Inside the executive building, the Jedi mounted up. They were able to get Palpatine to return from the bunker he was taken to. The commanders were trying to sort out which of the orders were correct. Oppo had his, and Fox had his own. Now that they were sharing their orders with each other, it just added more to the inhibitor chip. How are they supposed to put the Jedi in power while also have the clones in power, take out the established local government on Coruscant, wipe out the senators inside the Senate building, but nowhere else, while also protect the former Chancellor in a bunker in case of an attack? Isn't that a whirlwind? Yes, it is. But the Jedi were trying to deduce that this all was some sort of mistake, asking the important questions that the clones still hadn't been able to get around to. There were reports across the galaxy about a number of different events taking place. The most terrifying of them was a dance routine on Megiddo. The Jedi figured out that if the order they got wasn't the order the others received, then perhaps they were faulty orders. Palpatine was really annoyed. He didn't understand how this could all go so wrong. It didn't matter. He just had to wait it out and take control over everything once it was finished. Fox then reported that the commander on Kamino had troops scouring the Kaminoan database for information. Sidious rolled his eyes. He would have used Order 149 on the clones at Kamino. Truthfully, he considered the idea of using it on everyone, but he knew it wasn't worth it at the moment. He needed to get his power back with the Jedi watching, and then he could do what he needed to do. The Jedi would be dealt with in another way. Palpatine was perfectly content with his outcome. However, he was curious as to where Skywalker was. The funniest part about all of this is that despite the Jedi trying to help Palpatine, there were 3 dead Jedi just a couple rooms away. They were helping the same dude who killed an electrical and vented out to join them in admin. Wild. Anyways, it took some time, but the clones agreed to step back and allow Palpatine to return to power. He seemed to be the right guy for control. The guy who issued out the orders had a cloak on, so they couldn't tell if it was actually him or not. Palpatine said it wasn't, so that had to be true. For the Jedi, this was the weird part. How or why would the clones follow orders so blindly? Everything felt really eerie about this. Additionally, there was a concern to why Palpatine was wearing his hood, but he just said he was cold, and Sindralik bought it. He barely interacted with Palpatine before this moment, so he didn't have any reason to not believe him. When it came to the cloak, it was just a toss-up. Palpatine hadn't lied to the Jedi yet, why would he lie to their faces? As Palpatine took his power back, the clones stepped aside and the Jedi asked Palpatine what they could do for him to help him out. He told them to go to the Senate building and make sure everything was okay and taken care of. As he was making his request, Fox and Apo informed everyone in their units that Palpatine was Chancellor once again. Palpatine then turned to his men and thanked him, before requesting that they clean up the mess around here. He smiled softly and turned back. All these mindless drones would pay for their insolence. As he turned his head around, he looked right down the barrel of a blaster. One of the men of the 501st had Order 65 running through his head. He happened to wake up a little bit late inside of the barracks of the Resolute, so he took a viewing to the executive building. He initially was going to kill Fox, but with the new orders coming in, all he had to do was pull the trigger. The clone would be a hero, but his actions turned Palpatine into a martyr. The shot heard around the galaxy would kill Palpatine instantly, and the clone would be killed in 1 or 2 shots by his own brothers. It wouldn't be until a couple hours later that Clone Command was able to issue out Executive Order 150 to the entire galaxy. This nullified all commands, and therefore made the inhibitor chips permanently useless. But the effects of Order 66 changed the galaxy. Despite Palpatine being killed, several Jedi were slaughtered, several clones were killed by their brothers, and by their own hands. Not to mention innocent targets, Kaminoans, and a handful of unlucky senators inside the Senate building. There was at least some good news. Commander Chancellor Fox pushed for a successful attack at Raxus, and once Order 150 made it through Republic Comm chatter, Raxus was captured. The war was over. The transition from war to peace was one of the weirdest occurrences ever seen in galactic history. Before Palpatine's death, there was a wave of propaganda released by Fox's administration. Obviously, Palpatine was dead, but the B-1 droids from Utapau killed and reported the deaths of the entire Separatist Council on Mustafar. Inside the Resolute, Anakin and Yularen were released from prison, and due to the chaos and ineffectiveness of Order 66, Anakin rushed to Padme. He believed he was in the clear. Skywalker would be able to be with Padme when she gave birth to Luke and Leia, and he would keep his seat on the High Council, especially with Ahsoka rejoining the Order. However, there was an issue. Because the Jedi and clones were leading split investigations, it was uncovered that Anakin was semi-responsible for the death of Mace Windu. His actions directly resulted in Mace's death, and therefore, he was removed from the Jedi Order. Despite the losses the Jedi suffered, the Kaminoans were the greatest victims of this execution. They lost their entire science wing, all their scientists, and the Republic wouldn't pay them for the army they created. Because as it was revealed by the clones, the army was created to help Dooku take over the galaxy or something. That's how it came across to the public. The Jedi were able to uncover the truth about Palpatine, but the Republic covered it up. He was already a martyr to the public. There was no need to lose their patriotism. With Anakin kicked out of the Order, the Jedi were able to secure themselves in this post-war era. Due to the semi-heroic actions of the clones on Kamino, the Senate would elect for them to get pensions and protection once they decide to retire from military life. And they also elected to help the clones adjust into the post-war and retirement eras as well.
And it's madness.
While they were good soldiers, they weren't able to reduce their accelerated aging. This was because of all the Kaminoans killed. The loss and sacrifice during the trials of Order 66 would be remembered annually. The clones and Jedi would never hold animosity towards each other, and would become the strongest allies in the post-war era. With 4 council members gone, Obi-Wan would be elevated to Master of the Order. Anakin, despite being upset about being forced from the Jedi Order, would be able to live a relatively ordinary life. He enjoyed being married, and he enjoyed being with his children. Padme stayed in politics to help restructure the Republic away from the role of Chancellor, but their little dynamic worked well for the two of them. The trials of Order 66 would leave not just the Skywalker family, but the rest of the galaxy on the better side of what could have been a tragic outcome. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Django Fett Clone, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Grandaddy Bane, Laliand, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sith Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis League Star Wars, Airbus, Rex Wolf, the Man 3 First Names, Darkseid 46, Baron Joshua, and then for supporting the channel, smash that like button. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out my Patreon. Cool things on there. Otherwise, let's talk about this. First things first. The executive orders, for the most part, I made up, just for the purpose of having something interesting happen, something that we've not seen before happen. I didn't want to do the same thing we did last time with the clones turning on each other, and I feel like having so many clones with so many different orders would completely throw everyone into disarray. They'd be trying to do different things. But it was kind of fun to have different orders go through the ranks. I'll probably use a list for other stories in the future just for fun, but for right now, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.
Yeah. And now I'll back to this video, and then this one later. But I'll back to this. We'll back to that one next in a little bit. But yeah, having all the orders activated is like insane. Yeah, that must have been like that's just hottest show. I don't know. But yeah, that's insane. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I'll have the channel in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And bye for now. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.